have Facebook issues, so that's why we started going to YouTube. All right, and we are live. Wait, let's see if we've got some people on, and I'll do introductions.
Are you on the West Coast?
I'm on the East Coast in Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So north of you, because you're both in Florida, right? Did I read that?
Sorry about that.
Totally fine. Totally fine. It's normal in my life. Dogs, kids, all of that. So
Somebody ring the doorbell.
I don't know what my husband's doing. I'm wandering around the house.
Oh, my Alexa's going off, so it's all good. All right. So we are live. I'm Kristen for Bookish Pen Pals, and I am live with authors, best-selling authors, Kendra Elliot and Melinda Leigh. And tonight we're going to talk about Echo Road, which is their latest collaboration book, which is fabulous. I've been talking to everybody that I can in our group about it. So I'm just going to give everybody a minute to come on. And I was actually introduced to your book by Megan Beatty. And I was just telling Kendra and Melinda before we went live that I devoured this book in 3 hours. I got sucked in and I was on the phone because my partner and I often do reading dates at night. And so, what are you reading? And I'm like, oh, I'm reading Echo Road. I got this as an arc. And she was like, oh, and then a couple hours later, we were still reading. She's like, so what are you reading now? And I'm like, I'm still reading and I'm almost done. She was like, what? I was like, yes, I got sucked right into the character. So it's 8:03. Let's jump right on in. So tell us a little bit about Echo Road. And then I have lots of questions about everything. I have a whole list. So does one of you want to talk about what Echo Road is about?
Echo Road is the book where we brought together Kendra's character, Mercy Kilpatrick, and my character, Bree Taggart, to solve a murder, a double homicide, and find a serial killer and save a missing senator's daughter.
Yeah, we'd wanted to do a project together like this for a long time. And we thought it'd be great to bring together these two characters from our best-selling series. But we couldn't figure out how to do it because my character's on the West Coast and hers is on the East Coast. And, how can you make that happen? And we were at a conference and they were presenting a real case. And we were listening to the technical aspect of it. And we were like, that's how we do it. That's how we do it. We can make this happen. And we've been talking about it for 4 years, 5 years, long time. But we just couldn't get time in both our schedules to make it work because we had to sit down and write together. And we both have deadlines and life. And last summer we managed to do it.
Wow, last summer.
Yeah.
So in a year, you've both written this fantastic book, had it edited and published and everything in a year.
Our publisher typically does 9 months, 10 months.
10 months, I think, about 10 months now.
Once you turn a book in, they'll usually plan to have it released in 10 months.
Oh, wow. So I had planned on, I noticed that you have written novellas together, 6, 7, 8 years ago, where you were bouncing off each other for chapters and those kinds of things. How is this book different when you started writing it together? Because the blend of your characters is so seamless. It's like they were best friends to start with, even though they're a little skeptical of each other at first. Mm-hmm. So how did that work?
The novellas was our first collaborative project. And that was at the request of our publisher. Our editor said, well, it would be really fun if you guys could do something together. So at the time, we were both living on opposite coasts. So we came up with a novella idea because it worked for us. So we would get together and we would plot out, 2 or 4 novellas at a time, roughly. And then we could go back to our individual houses and write them. Mm-hmm. They were in the same world. There was an overarching story. Right. But for the most part, we could just go and write our stories separately. But this book is actually, one novel. It's much more integrated. It took a lot more collaboration throughout the entire process.
Yeah. We are practically alternating chapters.
Yeah.
Kind of. so we always had to know what was happening, what the other person was writing. And we would only plot ahead, I don't know, 2 or 3 chapters. We knew where we wanted to end up. We didn't know how we were going to get there. So we just made it work.
So how did you decide to choose these characters? Because Mercy and Bree are so dynamic and so strong in their own right, in their own series. I know that they're fan favorites. So was that like the choice for it? Or did they just work with being on opposite coasts and then coming together with the story? Like, how did you choose them? Because they're pretty great characters.
I don't think we ever discussed anything else. I think we just knew right off that I knew I wanted to write Mercy. Was it always Bree that we were going to do for you, or did we talk about?
Yeah, that's what I've been writing for, I don't know, 3-4 years now. Bree Taggart.
Yeah.
You know, I'm writing book 10 now.
It's fantastic. So I was looking, and I don't know if some of the members in our group realize it, but between the two of you, you've sold 27 million books, which is staggering and fantastic and award-winning and bestsellers. And you both have multiple series too. So do you think that you're going to write another book where you're bringing some of your other characters together? Or will Bree and Mercy show up again? Because I'd like to see them work on cases again.
We've talked about both those options. We've also talked about doing something completely original too. We have a lot of ideas. It's time that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it always the thing in life, right?
We're getting such good feedback, though. I mean, people have really loved the chemistry between them.
Yeah, I had not read
towards that, but
yeah. And like I said, I was sucked right in, and I loved how they just melded together and worked together. It was fantastic. I loved it. I've been telling everybody, please read Echo Road. It's really great. So where did the idea of the serial killer, come in, and then, having the senator's daughter? I don't want to give too much away if anybody has not read it that's watching or will watch it, because I hate spoilers too. But how did that come up? Was it something that you had thought about before, or was it an idea, from your seminars or conferences? How did you decide on that? Because I think serial killers are really popular right now. I hate to say that because that sounds really weird. But I think people are fascinated in a way by them. And so when they find characters that they really love, I think that draws us in a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So
the senator, the problem was we had to get Mercy to New York. Right. So what would be a big enough deal that would take Mercy to New York? And with the FBI, there's only certain things that they do. But when you're talking about people, what's the word I'm looking for? Congressmen, senators, that sort of thing. If something's happening to one of them or their family, the FBI will usually get involved. And so we're like, perfect, we'll do this senator's daughter thing. And that was big enough to get her across the United States because, go ahead, Melinda. It's getting dark here. I'm going to turn a light on.
It is getting dark. I put my light on here. Yeah, the senator's daughter was really just, we needed to have a case which the FBI would actually investigate.
Right.
And the double homicide, just to have them come together, that gives it. If you already have people who are deceased, it puts a lot of urgency in, finding the senator's daughter once Mercy discovers that there's a connection between this double homicide that just happened in New York State and her missing senator's daughter case. So that adds a lot of urgency, and they already know 2 people are dead, so I better get moving and find this guy.
And boy, the senator's daughter. I was reading, I went, oh, what? Because I could totally see that trying to be some sort of cover up. I would hate to think that's that way about all senators' daughters, because I'm sure it's not, but I was like, oh no.
It happens.
Well, and the thing of it
Not
is,
that age, not thinking.
right. And I don't think, because I'm a teacher for one, I have a daughter who's almost 12. I don't think they're self-aware sometimes to know that these things happen and can go bad fast. Like they think it's this, novelty thing to rebel, and then all of a sudden it goes terribly wrong. And it really does. And so I really liked the ending in that part of the book as well, because that's different. So when did you decide to put in, or how did you, the chapters with the actual killer giving what he's doing? Because it becomes this like cat and mouse, like, ha ha, you guys kind of thing. And the women outsmart him in the end, which is great. But when did you decide to give his point of view? Because I love that as a reader.
Did we decide that before we wrote it? Did we know there was going to be a killer POV?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
I just know we wanted that psychological aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we knew we would probably have to write his POV just to cover certain aspects of what was going on. But Melinda wrote that first creepy chapter.
That was me. I wrote him. Serial killers on me.
Oh, so creepy. And the chapter title is just him. And I'm just like, oh, it makes you like look around, like, oh, no. And I'm like, oh, and this, I would imagine happens, right?
Oh, excuse me.
As you were writing together, like, what were some of your big aha moments in the book where you were like, oh, yes. Did you have those?
I think we didn't realize until we got writing that the relationship between these two women was really important, and we wanted to foster that. They don't trust each other to start with,
Right.
but we wanted to put them in some situations where they had no choice but to trust the other person. And I think writing those scenes was a lot of fun, just because, you got nowhere to go. You got to turn to this person that you barely know her and see if she comes through for you. And of course she does.
And these characters so well. Was there any point when you were writing that you were like, oh no, she would not do that. We can't have her do that. Or maybe you took it up a notch and be like, she's going to do this next, or they're going to do that together, because really they're in it together really quickly.
Not that I can recall.
I think we know our characters really well.
Yeah, we do. After writing so many books about them, we know them.
So it would be more like me saying to Kendra, so what would Mercy say here? And what would Mercy do here?
In the chapter that Melinda's writing, she'd ask me,
Right. Or read this, make sure that, Mercy's voice is authentic here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I love that. And are you best friends in real life too? In action? Yeah. I'm putting you on the spot here.
We are. Just for 12 years. Just for the last 12 years, that's all.
Honestly, like, I think some of the best friendships are that way, and you end up becoming family, no matter how short of a time period it is. And it was kind of neat as I was delving into, your backgrounds, to see people going, wait a minute, are they two separate people? And that was a lot. And, even when I was reading Megan's press release for the book, she even mentions that in there, that people often wonder if it's one person, and you look similar too. So I could see why readers would think that, because your writing styles are very similar as well. Did you have any challenges writing Echo Road together, since you have this good relationship, your characters well, and you've written before together? Were there any challenges, or did it just kind of flow?
It went so fast. We wrote the book so fast.
So we wrote this in 7 weeks, which is absolutely insane for writing a book. But we know each other. We know we know the other person's work ethic, which I think is really important. Yeah. We don't have big egos, and so there's nothing that I'm going to say absolutely not. You can't do that. That won't happen. It'll always be, well, yeah, let's figure this out.
How exciting. 7 weeks. Wow. How much time goes into like the research process part of it? And you've been writing books, both of you, for a long time, but like the crime scene, everything, like, how much research do you have to do to make sure things are accurate? Because fans are not kind sometimes when they're not. And how much do you have to like delve into the whole world of how everybody acts and what they do? What's that look like?
I think the basics we know at this point after the number of police procedurals we've written. And then what I do is I just research just little bits, just small things, whatever if I need to know how many hours it takes for something to happen, or, how many hours does it take for blood to dry, or in certain conditions, I can just look at those small things. I will go down a rabbit hole for research and be there for weeks. I'm a total nerd. So I have to really restrain myself.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I would imagine that you often wonder if, they always say Big Brother's watching everything we do, and some of the Google searches that you have to do for some of these things. Right? Did you have any bloopers while writing or editing where you were just like, oh, wait, because I would imagine that you get very immersed into the world. And in 7 weeks, like, coming out of that whole storyline to look at the rest of the world, like, I would imagine your characters are like alive with you once you're done.
I don't think there were any bloopers. I don't
Not
think.
that I can remember.
Maybe occasionally I would use the wrong character name when I was writing and not catch it till later. But I do that in my own books. Accidentally use a character from 5 books ago. I don't know why.
Yeah. I would imagine they become like your children after you know them so well.
Yeah.
We call our kids, by someone else's name all the time. At least I do.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Let's see. So who made the final decision for your cover art? Because it's pretty great. This was a reader's question. Did you decide together? Did the publisher decide? Who decides those sorts of things?
Our publisher gives us a lot of input on covers. They had delivered, a half a dozen concepts, I think. And that one, it originally had our names in yellow and the title in white. Whatever it was just kind of boring. And then Melinda popped the title into teal.
Yes.
And oh,
that's better.
That's our cover.
Yeah, Amazon publishing is so great because, some of us take the dust jacket off, and
Pretty.
They do such a gorgeous job with their books. They're like collector's editions in themselves, So I like that you had that much, leeway with it. So for both of you, what is your favorite genre to read? Is it suspense, or do you find that you want to go to like romance, because you've been writing about serial killers and, court and FBI and all that good stuff?
I read everything. So I read, a lot of historical fiction. I love memoirs. I do read police procedurals and suspense thrillers, but typically not while I'm writing one. Right. I'll go read general fiction or something completely different.
I like police procedurals. I will always read my favorite authors in those. But I also love historical romance. I like fantasy. I like a little science fiction, but yeah, I'll read anything. But you're right about when I'm writing a book, I am not reading suspense novels. I don't know why. I just can't.
I would imagine that it would be hard to separate them because I'm a super visual reader. And so that world comes alive in my brain. And if I was reading that, at the same time, I could imagine that probably could get muddy, Who are some of your favorite authors?
Oh, I will read Michael Connelly, Robert Crace. Greg Hurwitz is great. Both Melinda and I discovered him last year and just read through everything he had.
His Orphan X books are fabulous.
Yes.
Lisa Gardner. I love Lisa Gardner.
Gardner's great.
We love all those suggestions in our group. What book do you recommend the most when people ask you?
Of ours or another book?
Another book.
I would say the first Orphan X books right now.
That's
I just finished 8 of them.
Suggesting that one too. Really enjoyed that.
We'll have to look for those. Our group has almost 8,000 members, and we're constantly saying, "Have you read this? Have you read this?" But everybody has their like one recommendation book, and so I always love to ask that, because that one gets hard as readers. There's so many awesome books and authors, but I think there's always a couple we go back to and reread and reread and reread. So I'm gonna have to look for those.
I think I'm currently reading a Lee Child book that's probably 15 years old, and I've read it probably 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
I'm currently reading The Guncle Abroad, which is hilarious.
That's on my TBR, although I'm not allowed to buy any books this summer because there's over 400 not read in this room. Because I start obsessing once I find an author that I really love, like Robert Dugoni. I was introduced to The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell, and then I bought every single book. And then I read Echo Road, and then I started buying every single book. Both of yours. And then I'm down.
Our evil plan is working then, if that's what you went and did.
Totally. And then I get in the book group and I'm like, have you guys read this? You need to read this because this is really good. You're going to love them. So there's a couple questions in the chat. So I'm going to bring those up. This one's from Jamie. She's the founder of our group, actually, and one of our admins. So she says, Melinda, if we start reading your books, would you start with Echo Road or another one?
Echo Road is a separate story. So it depends what kind of reader you are. All of my books have separate mystery plots. But if you're a character reader and you read for that character development, then I would say go back to Cross Her Heart and read Bree Taggart's first book.
I'm a big character reader. So I'm like, if the characters are really strong, then I'm sucked right in. And if they're strong female characters, even better, because we need those in our world. I saw another one up here. I always like to put these up too. So Nicole Rubin actually reads in my Fable group as well. And so she said she's excited to read it because she has a friend that's read all of Melinda's books and loves them. And she's always recommending them. So
yay.
And there's a lot in the chat of these, they want to read all of your books. There's a lot. I started going through like the print list and I was like, oh boy, I better get on Pango fast because that's where I buy a lot of my books. I bought a few and I'm like, oh gosh. So this is a pen pal group and I always love to ask this, but what do you think? And I'm going to ask this of both of you. We write introduction letters to the person that we're writing to. And typically we have like a standard letter that we send. What would Mercy's introduction letter say if she was getting a pen pal? How would she introduce herself?
So when you say an introduction letter, it's introducing yourself to somebody.
Yep.
She would say that she was raised in Central Oregon in a really rural community. She was raised by preppers, and they had a big distrust of federal government and law enforcement. But Mercy decided to walk away from how she was raised and become an FBI agent, which is federal government and law enforcement. She would also say that she likes her coffee black, well, not black, but with heavy cream. And be prepared. You should always be ready for an emergency. You should always have your to-go bag ready to go if you need to leave town. Your gas tank should always be 3/4 full in case you need to get out. She grew up expecting the end of the world, essentially. And so her family was always ready for shit to hit the fan, essentially, and lose the electrical grid, that sort of thing. So even though she kind of moved away from her family, she still couldn't get out of that mindset.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what she would say. Trying to think what else. That's pretty much her.
All right, Melinda, you're up.
So
What would
Bree
Bree say?
Taggart, let's see. Bree Taggart was a homicide detective in Philadelphia. And in Cross Her Heart, which is the first book, she goes back home to upstate New York to solve her own sister's murder. And she and her two siblings, including the murdered sister, had a very traumatic childhood. When Bree was 8, her father killed their mother and then himself while the children were hiding from him. So it's a lot of trauma in her life. So she spends most of her time just trying to help people. You know, she clearly remembers, she was 8 years old when it happened. She clearly remembers the county sheriff coming to the house and taking the children out from under. And she just has a very strong memory of him. And that's what drove her to join law enforcement. So that's pretty much Bree in a nutshell.
There should be a lot of hands raised in the chat. My life would be very boring compared to that. It's always interesting when we do get pen pal letters, like to see what we have in common. And I think that a lot of people have childhood trauma or family trauma in this world. And then, you know, both of your characters have overcome that to make a difference in the world. And I think even in our fiction that we're reading, that as readers, we need to recognize that we can still relate to these characters, even if we're not in the FBI or not sheriffs. And these women are still fighting for respect and law enforcement in these books. And, you know, I just started reading A Merciful Death. I'm like a third of the way through. And the to-go bag is in there. And now I know why. I'm not very far in it. And I just love the way that they're still admitting they're human. And yet they are doing this job that is so difficult and trying to get the respect of people. So kudos to both of you, because I immediately was like, I love these characters. Now I have to read more about them. All right. So here's another question from Nicole. Which book of Kendra's would she recommend we start with? And how many are there with this character?
So Mercy's first book is A Merciful Death. There are 6 in the Mercy series, but Mercy also is a main character in a couple books in another series, which comes after the Mercy series. But I would start definitely with A Merciful Death.
All right. Let's see if there's any other questions in the chat. So what projects do you both have coming up? Because I need to, you know, get those on pre-order.
I'm writing Bree Taggart's 10th book, Beyond Her Reach, right now. I should be writing it right now. It did not work today at all.
I'm working on the first in a new series called Her First Mistake. And that'll be out next year sometime. My next release is in December, though, the last book in my current series.
Wow, very impressive. Well, thank you both so much for coming on. And I am going to tell everybody again, if you have not read Echo Road, go get it. I've been putting it out on my social media and telling everybody in the group to get it. And I know there's several people that have read it and loved it as well, including my second mom that I grew up with. She's like, what are you reading these days? And I'm like, go get Echo Road. And so she ordered it and she had it done within a couple of days as well. One of our other admin, Ramona, said, I want to read them all. This is how we are in our group. And then usually my obsession turns into everybody's obsession. So, but thank you both for taking the time to come on and just chit chat with us a little bit about Echo Road. I appreciate it so much. And then I can't wait to see where these ladies go. And I hope you write another book with them, because I loved this.
I would like to.
Definitely. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.